I'm Sara. I'm originally from Barcelona. I live here in Lisbon now. My background is in behavioral science. I have worked in tech for more than 17 years or so. A year ago, I decided to set up my own consultancy, which I am trained on AI governance and ethics, and my background on human-computer interaction and my behavioral science and psychology background. I'm completing a PhD in psychology and AI at Católica University here in Portugal. So I am actually now looking into much more anything to go with behavior and how it impacts this system. So, and that's actually what are we going to be, and it's moving ahead of me. How are we going to be actually looking into this today? We're going to be defining a bit more what is behavioral risk, how it emerged and how we can mitigate it. And this is basically the topic of our today talk. Maybe before we get on and we dive in, just to anchor it on a real case, you probably have heard of Workday. Any of you are familiar with the hiring system, the AI hiring system by Workday? Do we know what happened with them? Any guesses? Maybe by the picture we already can see that they have faced some sort of legal action here. So basically what happened with Workday, which is an example of when we see behavior, when we see these systems going into the wild and people start interacting with them, and we start to see unexpected outcomes out of a system that, by the way, it was audited. It was certified. It had passed certification. The ISO 42001 looks into the management systems of the AI, but also they were aligned with the risk management framework, the NIST. So all of that was very much check, and pretty much compliant. Still, they have a massive lawsuit because they were discriminating against people that were above 40 years old. So basically people that were sending their applications, over time they were getting rejected if you were above that threshold, that age threshold. Not that the system was designed by default like that. However, it learned that you have more chances to get hired if you are younger. So nobody was checking this. That sort of harm emerged over time. And that's what created that legal action, despite the fact that it was quite compliant at the time, and even they had their certifications there. Unfortunately, we do see a lot more of these type of headlines. You're probably familiar with some of these headlines that are starting to come up more recently, or less recently, right? But we're starting to see a little bit more of some of this impact that AI may have on humans, on their behavior and the final outcomes. We see more discrimination cases. This one this system was not lending loans to students this is in the US, that they were not white or non-citizen consumers, so they were properly discriminating against these populations. Or this health AI system was denying extended care to elderly. Not that it was done by design like this, but it learned the system that elderly people don't live very long, so maybe the extended care should go to younger people, right? So we're starting to see cases like this, which are quite surprising when we look into the details. Air Canada chatbot was lying to some customers, so there is also some damages there that they had to pay. Very sad. Is it coming up? This control from your iPhone, it's a bit too sensitive. Sad stories that we see in the news as well with teenagers that they embark in long conversations with these LLMs. In this case, there is this also legal action against OpenAI because this teenager killed themselves after long, prolonged discussions, and we see that the ChatGPT was actually ideating suicidal sort of approaches with this teenager. Very, very sad story. We see one of the psychiatrists at the King College London University is coining this phenomenon as AI psychosis, which it actually emerged with vulnerable users that they are being encouraged by chatbots and some delusional thinking by not pushing back on them, allowing them to rely or to actually believe their own lies or their own biases without any pushback. So it starts creating sort of that delusional and that psychosis. Sorry, we have a comment there. Yes.
Do you know if these conversations have been published?
If the conversations been published, some of them are being published. Yes, there is. There is actually. I do know a couple of psychologists that have been working in some of these cases, and they had access. I don't know how much public information they are, but I think there are abstracts that you can look into it.
Okay.
We also have this one, which is more recent. Is this guy that was entering into this school in Canada and fatally shooting some students, was actually being helped by ChatGPT. So obviously these are all cases that they are all in the news, and so we wonder, right, like what's happening? So what's the gap? Because none of these systems were intended to do any harm to people, but still are creating some damage here, and of course also damage to people, to societies, and also reputational damage to businesses and to these products. So the real gap here is what are we optimizing versus what's the reality, right? Like normally we're going to be looking into, and we are actually getting as an industry better and better, are looking into the model correctness. Is the model performing the way that it should be, is expected? Are we looking into, all these frameworks and they are, alignment with them? We have all these sandboxes where we train our models and we looked into the different metrics and we want to make sure that everything looks right on paper by all these simulations that we are running. And we have all these evaluation methods and maybe we're red teaming our models. But we're still looking into this, and we're getting really much better, right? Like we're getting much more sophisticated now than we used to at this level, but we are paying less attention to the system outcome. So what is the impact, again, what is the impact on the decisions, on human decisions? What's the impact on human behavior? And what's happening over time through the use when humans are starting to interact, to be in touch with these systems. So there is a little bit of a mismatch here, and we see two different types of risks. We see here on the left the system risk, which is the one that we are getting better at identifying. So if the model has any errors, if it's hallucinating, has bias, the wrong output. So we have methods to allow us to understand a little bit better all of these sort of system risks that emerge. We have less focus, so we have not been really looking that much into it, into another level, which is the behavioral risk level. So how people are trusting or not trusting these models or these systems, what type of reliance they have, over-reliance, under-reliance, how is being influenced on all their cognitive biases that already have, how they getting potentially amplified by these systems, how they are interpreting or misuse these systems. It could be that the same system, it has been tested and is very specified for certain cases, but it should not be applied to certain other contexts. But there is some misuse here by users, right? There is some changes on behavioral drift by some users that we haven't really realized on what's the potential damage. Maybe one time or twice, third time that they interact with the system, it's really minimal harm, but maybe over time, over the months or the years, can cause some damage. What's happening with the control or delegation that we gave to the systems, the accountability? So what I'm trying to say is that we have two different types of risks. One risk, we're getting really good at realizing what we need to do about it, and we have all these methods to understand if the correctness and the robustness of the model is there and the system. However, we look less into what's the impact on the human. And to make it a bit more concrete, we can look into a very specific use case. We imagine that we are building an AI financial assistant app. We imagine that this app is in online banking, And so looking a little bit at this use case, we see that this app is doing prediction. So it's looking at the historical data of that user, it's looking at historical data of other users in that app, it's looking at market data, it makes some recommendations for you. It's also conversational because it's an assistant, so you can talk to the system, and also has some agentic capability, not much, but is able to do certain things for you. And we are sort of building this system, and this system could do things like this one. It could move maybe an amount of money of your account, maybe move it to your savings account, or maybe it makes a suggestion that you could be saving money by moving this certain amount to a certain pot. Or maybe it's telling you some suggestions, or it's recommending you to do certain type of investments. Low investment, low or high risk investments, depending on your financial goals. So this is the type of app that we are designing, that we are building, that we want to deploy. So normally what we're going to be looking into, we're going to be looking very much into the capability, right? We're going to be looking into, is this the app is able to do what is intended to do? Is it doing what it says on the tin? How accurate are the outputs, right? How certain we have all of these suggestions, these recommendations? Is it doing accurate predictions? So we're going to be testing all of this before we actually deploy this live to our users. If we have some agentic capability, we're going to be looking into how much is able to complete the goals, these tasks that we are setting up. So we're going to be looking at all of those things. However, we cannot forget that there may be other outcomes that we also need to be looking into it. We maybe want to look into what's the perception of the risk. How much is this app maybe potentially influencing the risk behavior of these users? Maybe these users this is launched to the public, the general public. We want to launch this app to the general public, but maybe there is certain vulnerable users here, financial stress, financial constraints. It's actually making some users to have more risky behavior on their investment suggestions, and we have to also look into this because over time could create some disadvantages for certain users, right? Or maybe we see that there are some overgeneralization of some recommendations of this app because we have some proxy variable. It could be something like recommending very high risk, high growth investments to young users because historically we see that young users and males maybe engage more with high risk, high growth.
And then it might be also a bias from the maker itself, the bank, the financial institution. They might
Exactly.
want to push a product instead of another one that is better for the person.
Exactly. There may be some business goals that they want also to meet at that level. So we're going to have to be very aware that no matter how, there is going to be an impact on behavior, an impact on that human decisions over time. And regardless of their financial goals, we want to make sure that how they interact with the app or with this assistant in this case is not going to provoke a harmful behavior down the line. So how do we do this, right? So how do we identify, how do we mitigate behavioral risk? It is quite specific because, of course, we're looking into different types of behaviors, multiple different contexts and user types, right? So is there a formula that we can look into and help us at least start identifying what could be the potential risks here? Well, we don't want to forget all of these layers that are very, very important. We looked into before, right? Like it's all that robustness and correctness of the model is there, and we're getting really good. So these are the layers that are, of course, setting up our systems are very, very important. But we cannot forget that behavior will materialize in the interaction, right? And so how we enabling that interaction of the human and the AI is going to be really important because it's going to actually shape behavior. So when we see things like how are we prompting the system, the experience, right? What are the different options? How are we framing what the system can do? What are the limitations? What it cannot do? What are the friction points, especially when there is a high stake decision? How much friction we have in there so the user can think twice before engaging on on a high-risk behavior potentially. What's the handoff between the system, between the agent and the human? What's the oversight that we are allowing here? All of this is actually going to be shaping behavior. And this is important that we test in real life scenarios with real people, because only in simulations we're never going to really realize what's happening in real life. Of course, we can maybe not do that on massive scale, but we can do pilots that allow us to understand what's really happening over time in the experience at that interaction layer. Any questions so far? I'll pause here for a second. All right, so how do we go further, right? So yes, we need to look into the interaction. What else? How we can really understand a little bit more or identify behavior that can emerge and can be harmful, and how we can mitigate or govern this sort of layer. So we have a little bit of a formula here with three models. This is an assessment that we have created, and it's quite helpful to give us a signal. It's not a compliant tool. It's completely free as well. It's just that give us some questions that allow us to assess in what context this system is being designed and deployed, what potential behaviors can come up when the user interacts with the system, gets in touch with the system, and then looks at what controls, guardrails you have in place, and the governance mechanisms that's going to decrease that level of risk. So it really creates a behavioral risk score or profile that allow us to understand a little bit more or give us some directions. Potentially you could have evidence that allow us to understand behavior, but most of the time we may not have that evidence. However, it will create some assumptions, it will create some hypotheses of things that could go wrong that we want then to go and test it. So at least it's going to give us that awareness of some of the potential pitfalls or failures that we can see on the system, and things that we can do to actually minimize that through our controls and guardrails and through the governance mechanism. So this is really what we want to do here. And I can go back into our AI financial assistant, and we looked into it, and we imagined that we have gone through all the questions. There are not many, there are 30, so I'm not going to demo this, but I'm going to go a little bit through the results. So we've gone through all the different questions that allow us to understand the context of this app. So this app, it's been designed, deployed, looking into financial services. So by the EU AI Act, you're already on a high risk. So this is the baseline, right? So the context is going to establish this is the baseline risk already. It is been it targets the public, the general public. However, it can be vulnerable users. We don't know, so we can assume that yes, some users may be on a financial stress or constraint. We don't know what's the background, so we can assume there are vulnerable users. So we need to look into that. And then we look into the context of use and the type of AI. So what exactly is this AI? Is it generative AI? Is it predictions? Okay, give me recommendations. I can talk to it, so it's conversational AI. It has some agentic capabilities, so it does things for me. At what level? So all of those questions, there are a bit more, but all of those questions will create a baseline score and give you, well, you're starting from here, already on the context, this is your risk level. We can have an example. So this is the type of questions that will come up. This is just one that asks, well, wherever this AI take actions across multiple steps, tools, or platforms without direct user input at each step. So it clearly looks into the agentic capability, and if there is a way for this system to go through multiple steps without input, direct input from a user. Well, in our case, it's limited because we said that, yes, the AI can move money from one pot to the other, but I am going to be approving this, and it's very minimal of what we are allowing in this app. Moving on to behavior. Then in behavior, we also going to be looking into different areas that are also going to be very important here, right? We're going to be looking into sorry. Oh, there. I may leave it here because every time I touch it, it goes Crazy. So we're going to be looking into certain things that are very, very important for us in terms of behavior. Whatever the users are trusting or relying on this system, and what level do they rely on it. We're also going to be looking into potential misinterpretations of what the system can do, what are the limitations, the risk that it is exposing the user. So we're going to be looking at those things. We're going to be looking at the delegation as well of judgment. If we're starting to see that the users are not clicking on any information or options, but they are straight away accepting everything that comes from the system, or there is some automation bias. Here we can start looking into certain behaviors that allow us to understand if there is a change of behavior that it's important to us, for us to measure. Maybe one of them could be, are we seeing more risky investments through this app compared to before? Are we looking into any differences of outcomes as well? So maybe there are certain groups that we're starting to see different outcomes. Can we realize about this? Can we have a look? All of those questions are gonna start giving us a hint of some of the things that can go wrong. And we may not have evidence, we may have not tested yet these things, but already allow us to start forming our hypothesis and start going then and test it with real users to make sure that what we display, what we deploy in live, it's actually safer. One of the examples here from the assessment for the behavioral sort of model will be this one, for instance. Now, to what extent could repeat use of this system change how users make decisions over time compared with not using it? Yes, we're going to be shaping behavior, right? But we want to provide information to the user and functionality that allow them to take informed decisions about their finances in ways that are matching their goals, that they not damage them. So we really need to look at exactly what is happening here. What are maybe their levels of debt? What is their long-term stability, health, financial health and stability? So moving on to the next control. There. Moving next on to control. So here there is going to be also a set of questions that is going to allow us to look into all the guardrails or the controls that you have in place. That it's going to help us to minimize this behavioral risk. So it's going to look into how we explain certain things to the user. Do they really understand? Is it well explained, the capabilities of this AI? What is the role of the AI, the limitations of the AI, the risky is clearly explained as well on some of these recommendations. We're also going to be looking into some of these agentic workflows and actions. Are we allowing these agents to actually perform certain actions that are high stakes? This is financial services, high risk by the EU AI Act. We should not have something agentic that allows the users to delegate completely responsibility in something that will have an impact on their livelihoods. So this is very important as well, that we looked into it. It's been or not tested in real conditions. Yeah, we may have our sandbox and we've been training our model and we have all these scenarios and we have all our simulations, but have we been gathering data from real users in real life conditions? This is going to also be very important for you to look into, and it's going to help you decrease that behavioral risk, obviously, because you're going to have then first-hand evidence. Is a possibility for the user to reverse the actions when something maybe goes wrong, to cross-correct, to override? Do we have that capability on the system? Are we truly monitoring what's really happening? So it's going to be, again, sort of questions that is going to allow us to have a little bit of a score around all the guardrails or the controls that you have for this specific system. And, here. And this is one of the examples of a control question that you could have. No? If the system produces an error or it's behaving unexpectedly in a way that affects users, decisions or actions, to what extent can the effects be reversed or corrected? That's going to be really important, right? So this is the type of questions that may come up. Moving on to governance, another one that it is very important. Do we have the right mechanisms there to make sure that we mitigate all the risks? Do we have clear responsibility between the organization? Who owns the outcomes of this AI? Who owns the actions? If something goes wrong, what do we do? What happened? Do we have escalation paths very clearly defined? Do we have an incident tracking? Do we have documented every single issue, incidents? What do we do with it? Can we report it? Are we engaged with the stakeholders? Are we reviewing this? Do we have some change management, some approval of any issues so we can modify and make sure that the experience is safe? If we have some incident that just has happened, we cross-correct quite rapidly. Are we meeting our legal obligations? This is financial services, so we're going to have consumer law, we're going to have GDPR, data protection, the EU AI Act. Are we all aligned? All of this obviously is going to give us a score again that is going to help us to understand in reality what is the risk that we are seeing here. And again, it's not a compliance list, it's just a check-in. It's more a continuous evaluation of how this system is behaving in real life scenarios. And this is one of the examples for the governance. Now, to what extent does your organization have clear ways to identify and respond when this AI does not work as intended? Do we have a clear path there, which that could be an escalation path? What do we do when something goes wrong? All right, so let's look at the risk profile. So we've done all of this assessment for our AI financial app. And now, well, we have our score we looked into, and actually we can really look into the score. So this is our, which I done already earlier. So you can see here the type of results that may come up. So for this specific scenario, we have a moderate behavioral risk score or profile. Why? Well, we started with quite a high or elevated sort of risk score. If you remember, financial systems, general public, however, vulnerable users, some agentic capability. So this is sort of elevating the risk. We also had some moderate behavior, still quite restrained, but obviously we haven't really tested long-term enough to decrease the risk. So we have a moderated risk that we really need to look into how people are relying or not on those recommendations and what's really happening over time. We had put our controls, but some of them, they could actually be slightly more sophisticated. Some for our governance mechanisms. We may have had already certain governance in place, but maybe it's not very mature yet. We maybe haven't defined completely ownership, or maybe we don't have an escalation path yet defined. So it's going to give you really define a structured sort of feedback to allow you to understand also what are the next steps, or what can I do with this, right? And this, again, it's not a compliance tool at all. It's more to enable that discussion, to have a shared language where we are in a product review, or we are in an internal audit, or we are in a launch readiness meeting. We can have a discussion and say, well, we've seen maybe this potential risk coming up. Maybe we haven't had all the controls and guardrails in place, or maybe our governance is so we need to discuss a little bit more what are we doing with these things. So this is really what is this for. So back into the presentation. I also want to mention, and I'm wrapping up, I want to mention that the same AI, exactly the same AI, but it is maybe displayed for different contexts, for different target audiences. It will have different risk profiles. So we imagine that we have, that we have a writing assistant. And this writing assistant is a different use case this time. It's also for the general population, but the only thing it does is it's helping you write better. Okay, so far so good. It's helping me to maybe, my grammar, my spelling, maybe giving me some ideas before I copy paste. Maybe it's prompting me to check it and review it before I send it to someone else. So, okay, that's an interesting use case. Now we have the same AI It's an educational context and is for minors. And it's helping them to write their essays, it's helping them to do their homework. So the risk profile here is going to be completely different. Can we guess? Can we guess what's going to be the different risk profiles potentially if we have to say? What do you think? What do we think the first one, the writing for adults, would potentially be? Any guesses? No. Say again? In terms of level, if we looked into, is it?
We'll look totally like not human, I mean, totally right.
Okay, good. So low risk.
So correct.
Yes, it's going to be a low risk, right? Like what we deploy in here, obviously, yes, we need to put into place all our guardrails and governance for sure, but already we are coming up with a context that is quite low risk, and there is some behavior that we need to look into. But overall, we're pretty safe as scenario use case in this example. Now, what's happening with example number 2? If we have a guest, the risk, it may not be high, but it will be elevated. It depends on the guardrails and the governance that you have in place, but definitely it's minor. So by context, already it's telling you it's high. And depending on what exactly how are you deploying this, and what exactly are you allowing this AI to do, it's going to have much more behavioral risk. And what are the governance? Also, you're going to have other type of responsibilities in terms of compliance, all the safety around child and minors and safeguards that are necessary at this stage. So you're going to have to look into very specific areas as well. It's the same AI. However, the context is completely different, the audience is completely different. So it's going to help us to fully understand or have this conversation at least into what are the potential risks that we are seeing. You can actually try it if you want. This is a QR code for the assessment. It's completely free. You can just look into it and test it if you are designing or you are deploying, launching some AI, and you want to check the behavioral risk, please feel free. It will give you some categories as we have seen, and it provides that direction. Again, it's not meant to be a compliance tool at all. And so if I want to leave you with one final thought, is that all of these layers are really, really important. We do need to govern our systems very, very carefully, but we cannot forget that the interaction is where behavior gets shaped. And so we need to also govern that. And we're going to be doing that by observing users in real life scenarios. We cannot do that just only by having sandboxes and scenarios. This is very important as well. Important that we looked into the robustness and the correctness of all of these systems. But we also need to have pilots with enough users in real scenarios and context to understand what's going to be the behavior, especially over time. And with that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions,